Tonight, we are honored to have Betty Plewes from Climate Legacy as our speaker. Betty has dedicated much of her life to volunteerism, and she has especially had a long-term interest in Africa, gender, and non-governmental organizations. After teaching in Ontario, she worked as a teacher trainer for 3 years in Nigeria. She's been a longtime member of the Canadian University Services Overseas, now called CUSO International. And for nearly a decade, she was president and CEO of the Canadian Council for International Cooperation. In 1995, Betty participated in the creation of the Canadian Voluntary Sector Roundtable, a group of organizations that came together to strengthen the voice of Canada's voluntary sector, primarily with the federal government. Her experience in the voluntary sector includes serving on boards, editing a journal, and writing on the volunteer sector. And her most recent efforts have been aimed at how seniors can influence the climate agenda. With that, I will hand over to Betty.
Thank you, Lawrence. Are you going to share your screen now?
Yeah, you should have it.
Okay. All right, I'll just make, can you hear me all right? I'll just make a few comments first and then I'll do the share screen. So I'm really pleased to be here tonight and to have a chance to chat with you about some of the work that we've been doing. I want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from Ottawa on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I don't know the Frontenac area very well, but I have visited the provincial park and I drive over the Salmon River every time I go along Highway 7. And my husband reminded me that once years ago, in May or June, we took a camping trip on Kennebec Lake. So we put in at the Henderson Side Road and paddled up the lake and got out and were met by clouds and clouds of black flies. So we quickly unloaded and set up the tent and crawled into the tent, which was also filled with black flies. So we reloaded the canoe and paddled out on what was the shortest ever canoe trip of our entire life, I think. But today I want to talk to you about how I got involved in climate action, creating climate legacy, and what we're learning about engaging seniors in climate action. So I'll tell you something about us and how we think about our mission of engaging seniors. We'll talk a little bit about the assets that seniors bring to climate action: voice, time, and money. Time, because many seniors are retired and in theory have more time involved. Voice, because as you may know, seniors vote and their political voices continue to have quite a lot of clout. Money, not because we think seniors have a lot of money, but many do have pension plans, investment portfolios, and bank accounts. And these are places that seniors can leverage to push managers to invest in green options. I'll share a bit about the kinds of stories we've heard from our community groups in our network. And finally, we'll look at what people can do as individuals and together. So in the fall of 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued a special report which warned that if we wanted to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we had only a few decades to make a difference. And we had to act now. And it would require rapid and far-reaching transitions in land, energy, industry, buildings, transport, and cities. Now, like most people, I had been aware about climate change, but this report really struck me and made me much more aware that we were running out of time. And I was thinking about this, and a few weeks later, I was at an event with several former colleagues. And as we chatted, we realized that we'd all been struck with the urgency of the IPCC report. And someone said, you know, we should try and do something about this. So we started talking about what we might do. We knew that young people had been taking the lead on climate action, but we wondered why seniors' concerns about the future of our planet were not being heard. We thought there must be other people like us, retired, concerned, wanting to do something, but perhaps unsure about what to do. So through hosting some community conversations, we found that there were some major barriers to engagement. One was that people felt they weren't experts in the field. And even when they were concerned, they weren't sure what they could do and if it would make any difference, because the issues really seemed to be so overwhelming. So we started looking at how seniors are currently engaged and discovered a wide range of groups already working on climate action. Some were seniors only groups, and others were mixed group with large numbers of seniors. Many were small, local, and not connected to other groups or networks. And through discussions with these groups, we decided to form a loose network as a place where groups could share information, collaborate, and also provide examples to other groups of what things seniors could get involved in. So we created Climate Legacy to connect seniors to climate action, using the themes of time, voice, and money as core areas where they can take action. And there are now 30 groups in this network. Most of them are in Ontario, with one in Alberta and a couple in BC, but we focused our attention on Ontario. The Climate Legacy Project is related to the Group of 78, which is a registered charity who promote peace and disarmament, sustainable development, and a revitalized UN system. We have a steering committee of 5 people and 2 part-time staff. This is our steering committee looking extremely serious. I think they used photos from the time when they were working. This is from the time before we were retired. 3 of us were in the original discussion, and then we invited 2 other friends. We had all worked in international development, and none of us had much experience with climate action in Canada, but we did have some experience in nonprofits, research, government relations, advocacy, fundraising, campaigning. So Tim Broadhead began a lifelong interest in international development as a CUSO volunteer in Nigeria, which is where I met him in 1969. After working with several international NGOs, he became the president of the McConnell Foundation in Montreal, which supports projects to enhance Canada's sustainability, resilience, and innovation. Roy Culpepper, beside him, is an economist who has worked as a researcher and public servant. He's particularly interested in the crucial role of financial markets, institutions, and policies in shaping livelihoods. And for 15 years, he was the director of the North-South Institute, whose motto is Research for a Fairer World. He's also the chair of the Group of 78. Ricky Stewart, who lives in Victoria, has taught at the Coady International Institute at St. Francis Xavier University and was at one time the executive director of Oxfam Canada. And she has focused much of her work on organizational change and gender equality. Wendy Quarry has expertise in communications and has lived and worked as a consultant in countries around the world, including Pakistan and Afghanistan. And she continues to mentor research groups in evaluation and communications. And then we have 2 part-time staff who work with us, Emma Eider, who's a PhD student and a writer and a communications expert, and Leanne Colbeck, who's also a graduate student, and she does a lot of work on our website. And as we continued our work, we identified 3 assets that seniors have in terms of supporting climate action: voice, time, and money. And now, after doing this work, I would add skills. Seniors have many skills from their work life, which they carry forward into retirement and can be very useful in working on climate action. There are many examples of seniors using their voice through voting and signing petitions, phone calls to politicians, demos, or conversations with friends, children, or grandchildren. Many groups in our network are eager to collaborate with young people and have supported them in their Fridays for Future demos, which were started by Greta Thunberg. Last September, in the middle of the federal election, the Raging Grannies, an activist group who sing songs of social protest, literally raised their voices at the Canada is on Fire Day of Action on Parliament Hill in Ottawa to make sure that the climate emergency was a top election issue and urge candidates to ramp up their climate ambition. Seniors also have time. Now, this can be a contentious issue because while some of us are retired, we may feel like we have less time than ever. And seniors in climate action spend their time in many different ways. They retrofit their home, they volunteer with a local or national organization, and they lobby politicians. They help organize events, as with for our grandchildren in Peterborough, that until the 4th wave of the pandemic made them cancel, they were organizing a celebration of Peterborough's climate emergency declaration, which was also a subtle push to the council that action was still needed. Money is an area of particular interest to our group. How it is invested is a huge element of the climate crisis, and we need to tackle the issue from all sides, be it individual or public spending. Individually, we can have an impact when it comes to our personal investments. However, we know that increasingly we need to work collectively to get public pension plans to change, governments to stop subsidizing fossil fuel extraction, and banks to stop investing in fossil fuels. Climate Legacy has designed a series of webinars on these issues involving experts from Shift, an organization dedicated to pension divestment, and another with Good Investing to help seniors navigate the complexities of ESGs, green portfolios, and knowing what questions to ask your portfolio manager. Another webinar focused on renewable energy with the Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-op. I'll tell you a little bit more about 2 or 3 of the groups that are part of our network. The first one, Echo Elders, is based in Calgary. This is a group of grandparents and boomers who are concerned about the quality of the environment that they're leaving to future generations. And last year, they were focused on fighting the United Conservative Party's 2020 decision to rescind Alberta's 1976 coal policy and allow coal exploration in environmentally sensitive areas. When the Grassy Mountain Coal Project emerged as the first project to try and take advantage of this policy change, the Echo Elders, along with many other organizations, presented briefs to the panel reviewing the project and continued to broaden public awareness of the issue. And last June, the joint review panel denied the provincial application for the project. This was a rare but important win for Alberta environmentalists and for the country. One of the members of Echo Elders said, "I feel like advocacy is an antidote for depression and helplessness." In Ottawa, there's a group called Citizens Climate Council. This council, which involves 8 retired seniors who have a lot of experience in environmental management, both domestically and internationally, as well as a lot of experience with decision-making, governance, policy, and legal issues. It's a kind of voluntary consulting group which supports the City of Ottawa's ability to move forward on climate change issues. They offer strategic help to city employees. They also keep track of the list of climate commitments Ottawa has made and compare that with how much money has been allocated to climate change work. In an interview with one of the group's members, he said, "The city's climate group is ridiculously underfunded, and we know they're grateful to get some help along the way when there's research dug up by citizens." There's also a very dynamic group in the Hamilton-Halton area called GASP, Grandmothers Act to Save the Planet. They were started by a group who describe themselves as women of a certain age, feminists who have been active on social justice issues all their lives. And one of their campaigns targeted the managers and CEOs of Canada's big 5 banks. They sent many letters demanding that banks move away from funding fossil fuels. They've heard back from the banks and they've had a few meetings, but with little success. But they aren't giving up. And now these CEOs actually know who GASP is because they've received so many letters from them. GASP says that they believe grandmothers and grandkids have a unique voice. And when we join in unison with our grandchildren for a sustainable future, we believe that everyone must coalesce on the most critical, urgent challenge of our lifetime. For seniors, leaving a green legacy for the next generation is a compelling call to action. So you might ask what climate legacy itself actually does. We try to support and amplify the action and voices of people in the network. We have a website with lots of stories and ways people can get involved, and a social media presence on Facebook and Twitter. We also have a monthly newsletter that showcases actions, offers inspiration, tips, and resources for climate action across Canada and Ontario. We have a webinar series on public and private investing. And now we are working on additional webinar, which we will hold on March the 9th, and which anyone is invited to attend, on the public service pension plan and climate risk. On the 22nd of February, we're holding a session with members of our network on planning for the provincial election. Learned so far from this experience is that more seniors than ever want to tackle this problem, and they're doing it in many ways. People have started seed banks, are creating hubs of information about electric vehicles. They're organizing with their communities, with their municipal councils, and their provincial MPPs. And for us, it's been an incredibly positive experience to see how much people are doing. It gives us hope that this is a group of people who can and want to contribute to a net carbon zero economy and a more equitable society. But there's still a long way to go. Political divides are still a big factor in believing that climate change is not a big problem. Seniors are less inclined to believe it is a problem for them to solve, despite the fact that we all have to work on this and that the effects of climate change are happening right now. They're part of our present, not only our future. Excuse me. Seniors also have other priorities. We can't forget that within this category of seniors in Canada, there are many segments. Those who cannot afford to retire, those with serious health issues that aren't being met by our failing health system, and those who see racial equity, social justice, and discrimination as bigger fights that need to be prioritized. Since we started this work 3 years ago, there's been an explosion of information, new groups, campaigns, joint actions in the field. It's almost impossible to keep on top of all the information. But some things are clear. This is the challenge of our lifetime. Fossil fuel combustion is the primary cause of warming and must cease rapidly. Without this, there is no cure. However, it's not enough. In order to reverse the climate crisis, we need to draw down carbon and bring it back home. And in order to address these challenges, we need broad engagement throughout society, from individuals, groups, governments, and industry. But we now know a great deal more about how people understand and view climate change. There's a recent report from a group called Climate Access, which provides a lot of information about what Canadians are thinking about climate change and what will motivate them to get engaged. The majority of Canadians are increasingly concerned about climate change and are willing to engage in a conversation about the transition away from fossil fuels. At the same time, the public is still not clear about the major causes of climate change, threats, and the path forward. In fact, when asked about the cause, people often refer to the ozone hole. And the most common solution given in focus groups is recycling. The demand for climate action is high, but support for specific policies is uncertain. The topic is still polarized. Climate change and energy transition can feel distant for many, and few believe that the problem can and will be addressed at the pace and scale needed. While concern about extreme weather events seems to be increasing, less than 1/3 of Canadians see climate change harming them personally. Part of the challenge is that people view climate change as an environmental issue and do not necessarily connect its impacts to health, food, livelihoods, or other parts of their daily lives. Neither do they see it as urgent. People have a multitude of other worries and aspirations that take priority. They feel relatively removed from climate change and an energy transition in particular. While an overwhelming majority of Canadians now agree climate change is a major problem, only a much smaller group are reliably engaged on the issue or its solutions. There is a base of about 25% of Canadians who are alarmed and consistently give high priority to climate, and a large or movable middle, roughly 45%, who care but are not yet active, in part due to low climate literacy. So, what can you do about this? Or what can we do about this? Although there are many things that we can do as individuals through the choices we make in what to buy, what to eat, what to wear, what to drive, how much we waste, one of the most important things we can do is perhaps one of the easiest, and that is to talk about climate change. Spread the word. It's important to create opportunities to listen and talk. Research consistently shows that peers are among the most influential messengers, yet most Canadians aren't talking to their friends, families, co-workers, or neighbors about climate change. From recent research, we also have some ideas about how to talk about climate change. With people who are not engaged, don't use jargon. Even words like net zero or just transition should be defined or rephrased so that people know what you mean. People need to feel personally connected to the issue of climate change. They need to feel like it's an immediate part of their lives and not just out there. So it needs to be connected to something that they understand, something that they feel strongly about. You must have a messenger deliver your messages who is of the group you are targeting in order for it to feel authentic, honest, and personal. And people need to have clear, concrete steps for getting to the solution. We need to figure out how to talk about policies in clear language and explain how they impact the public's lives. We need to meet people where they are. Another important thing you can do is to focus on planet-friendly investments. It's not merely about divesting from fossil fuels, but in transitioning to a sustainable energy. The pension funds have a lot of clout in that area. You can learn more about how your pensions, particularly the Canada Pension Plan, is dealing with the issue of climate risk, and let them know what you think. There are many things you can do to address climate issues as an individual, but that is not enough. We need to work with others in groups and networks to bring about change at the local, provincial, and national level. One of the things that I think that you might be able to do, because this is already an area where you have experience and you can build on that, is to promote nature-based solutions to climate change. Nature-based solutions are sometimes called natural climate solutions, involve conserving, restoring, or better managing ecosystems to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Examples include allowing forests to regrow, restoring coastal wetlands, and switching to restorative agricultural practices that support healthy soils. These ecosystems reduce climate change by capturing CO2 from the air and sequestering it in plants, soils, and sediments. They also provide a wide range of other important benefits, such as cleaner air and water, economic benefits, and increased biodiversity. A healthy river or watershed can catalyze both climate adaptation and mitigation. Watershed protection in forested areas provides us with excellent drinking water while also absorbing carbon, effectively mitigating climate change. There may be ways, as if you don't already have enough to do, but there may be ways that you can expand the work that you are doing by collaborating with others in the region who are concerned about climate on a broader climate agenda. One resource in this area that might be useful is the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative, whose mission is to make natural asset management a mainstream practice across Canada. And vote for the climate. This is a big one. We cannot achieve the goals that we need to achieve without government action. Governments are key actors in addressing climate change, and we need governments at all levels to step up with ambitious plans to address the crisis. And we need to let them know that we will support them in this. That is why it's important to lobby politicians to support efforts to cut emissions and reduce carbon pollution. On June the 2nd, there'll be a provincial election in Canada, in Ontario. Climate was a big issue in the federal election in September 2021, and many people are trying to make it a key issue in the provincial election. Given the pandemic and all the things that are going on in various parts of the province and the country at the moment, this is going to be very, very challenging. The current provincial government has a poor record on climate and environmental issues, and this was foreshadowed when immediately after the election, the new government removed the word climate change from the ministry's title. As the Toronto Star said, instead of addressing the future and present risk of global warming, the Premier went retro by calling it the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Elections are often a good time to talk to friends and colleagues about climate change. We can draw attention to the climate plans of the various parties. We can attend all candidates' meetings and ask questions about their climate strategies. For the federal election, the community association here where I live organized an all candidates meeting and solicited questions from the community, and about half of them were on climate. Before the election, the Liberal candidate organized a session with the then Environment Minister because she knew it was an important issue for some of her constituents, because we'd already written to her and been in touch about our concerns. In short, we are a small and quite new organization, but we've seen a lot of positive things from our modest work. And we know that we're a part of a growing movement in Canada and internationally around climate action. We know that the climate crisis must be tackled from all sides in all kinds of ways, and we'd like to find ways to engage more seniors in this necessary transition to a more sustainable economy. We hope this is a legacy we can leave behind for future generations. These are three resources that I have found very helpful and have used in preparing this discussion. This book, Regeneration, is truly one of the best and most comprehensive books I've read on climate action. If you're interested in nature-based solutions, it's really excellent, and it has lots and lots of ideas of things that you can do and examples of technologies that we already have that can be applied to addressing the climate crisis. Climate Messaging That Works is a playbook that I have referred to. It's very useful if you're trying to do presentations yourself on climate action. And there are very many lists of things you can do as an individual or as a group to fight the climate crisis. This is one that I used, which is put out by the United Nations Environment Program. This is a cartoon that I've always liked. It seems particularly appropriate sometimes when we know that climate change can be very divisive. Even within families, it can be a divisive discussion. So we'd love to hear from you. I'm obviously we're going to have a time for questions and comments now, but if you have some ideas or things that you're trying, projects you're working on, ideas for engaging seniors in climate action, we'd love to hear from you. You can check out our website and send us an email and let us know what you're doing.
Thanks, Betty. I guess one of the big challenges sometimes is trying to figure out, what bite out of the big elephant we're going to take next. I often think of the saying of think globally and act locally. And I'd like to think that in particular, our two organizations, Friends of the Napanee and Friends of the Salmon River, work collaboratively on a number of initiatives, and I could rhyme them off, but it would be here all night. But in particular, I think what we're most proud of, or at least I think probably speaking too early here for Susan, but we go out of our way to try to influence the local agenda, whether it's the municipal government, the county, and then we kind of reach forward or reach out to the provincial and beyond. But I think many of us know sometimes dealing with the provincial government as it stands at this moment in time can be a little difficult when we're dealing with environmental issues or conservation issues or the preservation of the conservation authorities and so on and so forth. But we really do try to act locally with tree planting programs and, again, working with our municipal governments to try to further the agenda. And even that can be a challenge. We all know that. So it's quite interesting. What I'm going to do is open the chat line if you want. If you want to ask any questions specifically of Betty or to throw out to the group here this evening, please feel free. And I will go through them. So from Vicky, she asked, could you please offer examples of questions to ask portfolio managers? Is it all about fossil fuel investments to avoid, or is there something else?
I have to say, this is not my area of expertise. But since I'm in the process of this with my own financial manager, I have a few ideas. One of the things is you have to, you have to be careful with certain funds or with things like banking stocks, because you would think that those are clear, but most of the banks have very substantial fossil fuel investments, and so banking stocks are particularly problematic. Other funds, I understand there is a lot of greenwashing, so you really need, that is, they talk a good line, but when you actually get down to looking at what the individual components are, they are not so green. I guess the other thing is that it's not simply a question of divesting from fossil fuels, but it's also a question of supporting renewables. So how do we make the transition not only away from fossil fuels, but towards more renewable enterprises? I can give you the names of a couple of websites which do provide some more information, but this is not really my field of expertise. And I, in working with my own financial advisor, who is not very knowledgeable about this area, have found it a real challenge.
Yeah, there's some interesting comments I've seen. The first comment, obviously, from Steve Manders, but I won't read that whole thing because everyone can see it on the chat. From Phil, about talking about infilling, where cities build upwards and fill in the vacant lots for housing, spares the countryside of urban sprawl. It's quite interesting, and this is not in Phil's note, but this is more a comment for me, is that in our discussions with county planners, we have learned over the last several years that the provincial government, and it's not just the current provincial government, it's current and previous provincial governments, have an unwritten policy that they will not basically, or they'll try to restrict rural developments as much as possible to basically centralize, infrastructure and resources and so on and so forth within major towns and cities across the province. And of course, very often, we get into this discussion amongst our groups that, what do we want to do? Do we want to build subdivisions and so on out in the country with, centralized septic systems and excessive draws on the watershed and so on and so forth, or do we want to kind of force development or encourage development within the towns and cities? I think it's a tough argument, no matter which way you cut it. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has a question on that one in particular. What do we got here from Gail? Are you supporting any rewilding areas? I don't know, Gail, if you're targeting that at Betty in particular, or our group.
Well, there are, among the groups that we work with, I don't know of any rewilding projects, but I do know that as part of the network that you, Lawrence, as Friends of the Salmon River, belong to the Ontario Nature Network. There are lots of groups in that network that are supporting rewilding projects, as far as I know.
Absolutely. Other questions or comments? Again, I won't read all the comments coming through on the chat line here, because you can read them at your discretion. But anything, Susan, from your side of the house, from Friends of the Salmon?
Yeah. One comment I was thinking about when Betty was talking about the protection of water from forests is something that we quite often talk about in our group, and I know they talk about a lot in the Ontario Woodlot Association as well, which is the support that we can try and give to landowners who have large forested plots. For instance, in the Salmon River watershed, much of the northern part of the watershed is in fact quite well forested, which is part of the reason the river system is so healthy. And the more we can do to support the maintenance and the ongoing health of those forests is, really one of the best things we can do. Crown forests are, good as well. And also talking to our conservation authorities about how can we help some of the, the people in the that have well forested land to, make sure that they keep that forest healthy, that they don't, cut down a lot of trees, and that our shorelines are kept in really good shape. And of course, both friends of groups did work a little bit at a municipal level on trying to initiate a shoreline bylaw, for instance, to try and mandate that people cannot actually just clear cut trees on a shoreline. And boy, that's a big chunk to take on, and something that is just sort of slowly ongoing, because it's not easy to legislate that kind of thing. But also, I do think that working at a municipal level is what we feel most comfortable with, partly because, and something that Betty also talked about, was you need a connection with these people. It's a little harder to work at a provincial and federal level because, it's a little bit harder to get to those people, to actually know them. If you can have a personal relationship with even one or two people on your municipal council, then, you've got an in. And it's much easier to, have a good logical discussion with them about, changes that we'd like to see, and work that they can do on climate action.
For those of you,
as one of our friends in Lanark is always telling us, I think she says that 45% of things that need to be done in order to have some impact on climate change come under the authority of municipal government. So there's a lot that can be done there. On the issue of the conservation authorities, we did quite a bit of work here with others in phoning our local MP and raising concerns about what was happening. I'm sure you were active on this last year as well. And in fact, that did have some impact in the longer term on what the government was planning to do in terms of the mandates of the conservation authorities. So it was somewhat successful, not totally, but somewhat.
yeah, something that might be of interest to those that are inside Lennox and Addington in particular. I know a number of our viewers literally come from across the country. But for those in Lennox and Addington, you may want to keep an eye out, as the county is now about to retable its new official plan. So this is it was done in 2017. It was finally approved by the province, and the next version that will be coming out this year. But an additional and a very important addition to that official plan will be the Natural Heritage System Strategy. And again, Susan and your organization and the Friends of Napanee strongly encourage you to take a look at those documents, because the Natural Heritage System Strategy basically identifies how we're to manage the environment within, and I mean the environment, the lands and lakes and valleys and hills and vales and streams and rivers and so on within the county jurisdiction. It's an extremely important document, and even though it's about 2 years overdue, they will be completing it as part of this new revised official plan coming out this year. So keep your eyes on the county website if you're interested, because it will directly affect how you interact with your properties and your neighbors. So stay tuned for that.
On
Oh,
the
yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Betty. Yeah.
on the shoreline maintenance that you were talking about, Susan, I have some friends who are also trying in the Wilberforce Halliburton area to try and develop a new bylaw there around shoreline development. And it has been a very, very contentious issue and created terrific rifts in the local council as the various interests come out to play. So it's not, many of these issues are not easy. And we're really struggling with how we bring people more together and understand better what the challenges are and how to work on these. So I can appreciate that it's not easy working in your area either on this issue.
A question from Gail Betty about do you, I'm assuming Climate Legacy, do you offer any training or advice on the most effective way to communicate with local government?
No, we're thinking of doing that in the fall, but I did notice two webinars that the Ontario Nonprofit Network are offering within the next week. One is on essentially what are the limitations with the government, with the election coming up. What are the limitations that nonprofits face when acting and advocating during elections? And the other is on how to work with your local representatives. So I could send you that link. Those are two very interesting ones. We are planning a webinar in the fall on some of the material that I've presented here on how to talk about climate change and how to be more effective in delivering presentations on the issue. So I can send you, I can let you know when we do that too. But we decided it was going to be so busy during this pre-election period that we would do that one in the fall. But the Ontario Nonprofit Network is very good on these kinds of things.
Good, thanks. I suppose we could always just line up all our tractors and go up to town hall. No, don't go there, don't go there.
Oh dear, oh my goodness. Now that's
sorry, I opened that
another
topic.
whole discussion, isn't it? My goodness, here we are in Ottawa.
Yeah, better you than us, I guess, I don't know. What I'm going to do is hand over to Bill Kirby if he's still online here for a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Betty. The one great disadvantage of a Zoom meeting is you wouldn't have heard the 60 people applaud you for your presentation this evening. It was an exciting one, interesting to hear about Climate Legacy and its activities and its involvement with over 30 different community groups. That in itself is good news on a winter's night. It certainly looks like there are a good many resources there through your website and your webinars and your newsletter. I look forward to visiting your site very soon. And it certainly is a challenge of our lifetime, and the need for education. I was quite intrigued by your phrase climate literacy. I haven't heard that one before, and it makes such good sense to me that if we're to involve more people in this issue, we need to make sure that we're coming from a perspective that's informed. And it was a little bit alarming to hear of some of the research about the knowledge that people don't have, and the size of the work ahead of us. Introducing nature-based solutions, that was an exciting scenario. I think we, through the Friends of the Napanee River and the Salmon Field, were engaging somewhat with each other and with our local issues, but the idea of partnering with others into more of a climate concern rather that would widen our scope of focus for the opportunity to improve future of all of us. So it's been a pleasure to meet you on Zoom, and thank you so much for your time and for your inspiration this evening.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. So finally, our next event, it'll be on Tuesday, March 8th, when Friends of the Salmon River will host Kyle Blaney. We'll be speaking on backyard birding.
Oh,
He is with Shad Canada, which is a month-long outdoor education program for grade 10 and 11 year students. Kyle is also a member of the Quinty Field Naturalists. This event will be of interest to folks of all ages, as he will speak on how to identify birds and their behavior and the best feed to attract birds of all kinds. He'll also address citizen science tools and some of his birding trips and how he plans them. As always, we will be sure to send out the details of that event by email and using social media. You'll also be able to find information on the Friends of the Salmon or Friends of the Napanee River websites. So finally, many thanks for joining us this evening, and we sincerely hope that you and your families remain safe. Cheers and bye for now.
bye now.